Your journey has been an interesting one up to here. You've questioned so much more than those around you. You've even questioned yourself as to how you could have grown into these thoughts. Am I crazy? When did I begin to think differently? Why do people in general appear so limited in their thought process? Rest assured, you are not alone. The world is slowly waking up to what you already know inside, yet can't quite verbalize. Welcome to the Spiritual Dope Podcast, the show that answers the questions you never even knew to ask, but needed the answers to. Questions about you, this world, the people in it. Most importantly, how do I proceed now moving forward? We don't claim to have all the answers, but we sure do love living in the question. Time for another hit of Spiritual Dope with your host, Brandon Henley. Let's get right into today's episode.
Hey there, Spiritual Dope. I'm on here today with Amanda Kate. She is the author of Divine Messy Human, a spiritual guide to prioritizing internal truth over external influence, kinesiologist, mentor, archetypal life coach, mother, and more. A recovering people pleaser and self-flagellator, she walks the path straddling the divine and messy daily, always growing, developing, and learning new ways to hopefully one day leave the earth better than she found it. She lives in Melbourne, Australia with her twin flame, his children, and a dog named Zeus. I got to be honest with you, I may be most interested in the dog named Zeus.
I know. Do you know how many times I have had mentioned by all of them that I didn't mention any of their names, but I gave the dog name?
It's very, there's the family, they're over there, but here's the dog Zeus.
Oh, hell
so,
yes.
Very cool. I don't know if you saw, what did we just watch? The kids and I just watched Thor.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
The new Marvel movie Thor, and Zeus was in it, and very, very entertaining. So before we even fully take off, I'm feeling like my day was like energetically disrupted, right? Like, I mean, just a disrupted day. So I've got a Tibetan Buddha, singing bowl that I don't use as often as I should. Let's just hit it to get ourselves started. You ready?
Beautiful.
Let's do it. Let's do it, man. So I like to start these off with the whole idea that you and I are like, we're divine, spiritual creatures. We are conduits for universal energy life source, right? Whatever's coming through us right now is for somebody's highest and best good. Can only come through us in this moment, in this time and space. You and I aren't even going to hear it, right? No. But what's that message for somebody else today that's coming through you right now?
To breathe. I know that sounds crazy, and maybe it is because you mentioned that, your day's been a bit crazy and all over the place. And I think sometimes when we're feeling that way, we forget the really simple things. Breathe, go feel the sun on the face, go get some fresh air, have a glass of water. And sometimes these simple things really bring us back into our beingness rather than, flitting around all over the place.
Yeah, 100%. Those external things, they are exactly that. They're external disruptors. I love that you bring up the just breathe and these simple things. I also teach breath work, right, to a group of people, several people. But and today I don't have the book with me. I'm going through. I don't even remember the guy's name. Who's one of the breathwork coaches, 21 Day, Dan Brule. That's what I'm doing. Dan Brule's, and today's breath is like, find a breath and just feel it, right? Like, what is the emotional charge with that breath, and how can you make that breath express that without using your words? So that was one of the things that I had to do for myself. I didn't have to. I got to do it today for myself, and remember to do that. And then you also talk about, get out in the sun. Go do some simple things. And you know what I've been doing recently, instead of going to an office all the time, we have these phones, right? We have 5G. We can go anywhere and like work. Yeah. And so I just go places at 5G, found a nice park today with a willow tree, and worked under that for a little while today. So I can totally appreciate where you're coming from. And I agree, right? Go find some of those simple things. Well, look, let's talk about being divine and messy, right? I think if we, as we grow up, you and I in Western civilization, I know you spent some time in London, so I'm sure there was a lot of proper going on, right? And and religion and spirituality, I don't think there's the two different, but you've been taught like Catholicism would probably come to mind when you think of divine, right? And you think, well, super clean, right? If it's divine, then it's clean and not messy. You know, where does it come up? Like where do you land with that?
I see the divine and the messy in everything, pretty much. You know, we're doing the best we can. Even those people who are completely indoctrinated in religion, I think, are doing the best they can. You know, even with, you know, I guess some of those elements of guilt and shame and fire and brimstone and all of that sort of stuff, people are still doing the best they can. And that's the bit that I guess I tap into. I wouldn't necessarily call myself religious, but I do consider myself spiritual. My interactions with God and my connection to God, the goddess, is my experience, and it's my lived experience, and it's my own, I guess, communication and relationship, rather than looking at the organization of religion, the dogma and doctrine within religion. And sometimes I feel the cherry picking of lessons that, I don't know, have a very human element to them. And again, some of that stuff is extremely messy. You know, we've had some good examples of that coming out of, you know, the States in the last couple of weeks, you know, where religion is trying to get involved in certain things. And you're like, does it really say all that stuff in the Bible, or is it just, you know, an interpretation? And I think that's where I find it really fascinating, is looking at, okay, what is your interpretation of the truth? What is your interpretation of what you're reading? And that is where your valid truth comes from. And it's no less valid than my truth or anybody else's truth. It's just a different perspective to look at it from.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think the other part of this, right, is that even if you're reading, you know, materials and you're deeply immersed in the doctrine and the dogma, then you are challenged to, you can only come to that from your own level of understanding.
Absolutely.
Right? So until like you're, there's like multi layers, right? Like you can read the document many, many times over, read the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. And then like the next time you read it, it's like somehow the words on the page changed.
Yeah.
Right. You're like, I've been reading this my entire life.
Yep.
Whoa.
Yeah.
What just happened here?
100%.
Right.
100%.
You know, so you're now able to, though, if I'm hearing you correctly, you've had some of these kind of, I'll just call them awakening experiences, experiences where, you know for certain you've connected with source of some type. You've had experiences, you've got an inner lived experience, and you've got your own way of kind of expressing that. And that even if you look at this dogma and this other doctrine, you're seeing it through your own eyes and lived experiences and a totally different understanding.
Yep, exactly. And it's no more right or wrong than anybody else's experience. And I think that's what I'm starting to learn and love, is that, I guess early on, and I'm sure I'm not alone in this, you do go through this, well, my way is the right way, or, this is the way that we need to look at things, or perhaps this is the only interpretation that could be the truth. And yet I think this is why I love having so many conversations about it, is because every single time I get another view, another perspective of the truth. I don't know if you remember those filament lamps where there's a ball in the middle and all these little shiny filaments. And I look at every interaction as putting more filaments into that ball, so that hopefully eventually we get a 360-degree view of each of those different issues and things. And so every conversation I have, I look at adding filaments to my understanding of the world from a completely different perspective. And so I actually don't mind having conversations with people who completely disagree with me, or, are on a completely different tangent, because I will always learn something from them.
Yeah.
And that's what I love.
I mean, you at least understand their filter, right? Like, what's their filter, and like kind of what's coming out of there. And it's funny because you bring up the truth, right? And I think that there's a truth, there's your truth, there's their truth, and then there's like the truth, whatever
Yes.
that is, right?
Yep.
And we as humans, and I would have to say, it's going to be real tough for us to ever experience the truth because we're subjective. This is a subjective experience, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's interesting to go through that. Well, let's also let's tell people a little bit about you, right? Kind of what are you into? You've got your book. You do the kinesiologist. What is a kinesiologist? I mean, tell me all about it.
So kinesiology in Australia is a bit different from what you guys consider it in over in the States. So we often, I think you guys call it applied kinesiology. So it's much more about energy work, and we combine that Eastern wisdom with Western science. So it started with, I guess through that chiropractic arm of things where we started realizing that the spinal nerves talk to different parts of the body. But the way that kinesiology is put together is about, I guess, reading into the subconscious mind. And we do that through manual muscle testing. So if your muscle holds firm, there's no stress. If I think of something stressful, I can't hold my arm up. And so we're looking at almost that subconscious stress creating an electrical imbalance in the body. And that's what I am reading for the client or with the client and helping them sort of, I guess, see the physical nature while they might say one thing that they in their conscious mind would go, this is 100% true, yet I can muscle test them and it'll be, it's actually not true to you because of that subconscious programming. And that can be stuff that we've picked up from our families, from friends, from society, from school, from religious leaders, from whomever it is who's had an influence on our life. And so then we sort of take them back to those stressful times and we find the emotional resonance, why it's sticking in the body, why that is creating that disturbance in the field, and then we clear it through vibrational means. So I use a lot of sound. I know you've got the Tibetan sound bowl out first. I will use sound. I will use vibrational essences or essential oils, so plant medicine. And bringing in those different vibrations to change that vibrational structure. So it's part of the somatic therapies where we're actually shifting out what's stuck in the body and allowing people to move into new states of being from that with the conscious awareness of what their subconscious is trying to do to keep them safe. Because let's face it, our bodies aren't trying to do anything other than keep us alive and keep us safe. So every behavior pattern, every idea that we have, every behavior that we have is actually about us staying alive and staying safe within our tribe as we would have been born in, ages ago, and obviously some people are still in that community, but it's about being accepted by the community. And so we learn from very early on how we need to behave to be accepted within that community. And some people have great lessons and some people have less than great lessons. But either way, we will create behaviors and patterns around that. And so what I do is work with people. I look at it as rewiring the nervous system to a new level of knowing what safety is for them. So we do a lot of subconscious work, a lot of clearing, a lot of tapping into the body. Where are you feeling this stuff? And then also resourcing their inner children. So getting them to parent their own inner child and their own inner teenager to become more resourceful. And the more that we can parent those inner children and inner teens, the less we end up in those same reactionary patterns.
You get to take them like out of timeout.
Yeah, exactly.
Taking your inner child out of timeout, letting it come back out to play.
Yeah.
Is this? I got to imagine, with the work that you're doing, and just a brief exploration of what you're about. You've come across David Hawkins, right?
Yes.
And this is, kind of his space. Who else is really well known in this area for these responses? And are, when you're doing this kind of these tests to find the emotional resonance, is it kind of like just this type of tapping? Is it, do you go to a space on the body and say, I'm feeling it here? And walk us through kind of that experience of locating, I say I'm having a good day. You're like, no, you're not. Right? No, you're not. Walk us, or like, no, I love broccoli or whatever. No, you don't. It's just, kind of walk us through what a scenario is like that, and what type of kind of muscle testing you can do, and throwing all kinds of hands in there for you. I hope you're keeping track, because I lost track.
That's all right.
Is this something that we can do through a Zoom call?
Yeah, oh, yes. Look, I certainly do work online now, and it is that I tap into people, perhaps not the way I was taught in terms of kinesiology. I tap more in by the way I was taught when I did some mediumship and psychic mentorship. So if you imagine, even now, you're vibrating at a certain frequency. So even when we're interacting, I am tuning in to the Brandon Handley radio station. I am finding your frequency, and you are tapping into the Amanda Kate frequency, because we're having this conversation and we want our energy fields to merge. So in addition to that, when I work online, I imagine my auric field as a massive blanket that I'm going to throw over you to encapsulate your auric field, so that I can read that information without me taking it on. Because I don't want to get, my shit confused with yours, because we want to keep you clear.
Oh my God. Yeah, listen, we need to, I'm gonna table that one, right? Like, not taking on, other people's emotions.
Hell yeah.
I think that's we'll bring that one back up. Go ahead.
Yeah. So especially, and look, let's face it, I've had some pretty traumatic things that happen. You don't tend to move into this work without, a relatively rough road. And so I want to make sure when I am working with a client that we are keeping their stuff. We don't want to be clearing my stuff in their session. That's not what they're paying me for, and that's not what I want to be doing. So what we do, it really depends on the session as to how things pan out. But if I touch certain points on the body, so we use a lot of the traditional Chinese medicine points. We'll use, actually you can see some of the charts up behind me there with those points on, and we use the meridian structures. We also use the chakra systems. We talk about the auric field. So we are looking at the body as a holistic thing. So quantum physicists have proven the universe is 4% physical matter. And we look at you as a being as 100%. So when you think about taking the physical out, most people look at the physical as most of the picture. Whereas we understand that tapping into that, we also have our mental self, our emotional self, our energetic self, our spiritual self, our psychological self, our metaphysical self, transformational, relational, financial, all these different aspects of ourselves. Tap into this thing that is us. And most people think that our subconscious is in the brain, it's between our ears. But our subconscious is in every cell of the body. It is in our auric field. It is through every tiny piece of us that exists, is the record of who we ever have been in the past, who we are now, and who we ever will be. It's all in this field. Now, I don't tend to look into the future because, again, you have free will choice. You can choose one path or not. I look at, where you want to head to, what your next step is to get there, and anything in between that I see as noise, because that's our what ifs, that's our daydreaming, that's our wishful thinking, that's, nothing really concrete. But where are we heading? And let's get a really clear picture of that. Let's get a really good vibrational feel of what it will feel like when I get to that view. And then let's look down, what's my next step to get there? And then we glance over our shoulder to see what's holding us back from getting there. A lot of people in healing will stand basically looking back at what's stopping them from moving forward, but they're not getting a picture on the end result of what they're looking to achieve when
they got a bunch of baggage, Amanda. There's a bunch of shit to carry around. I can't let go of this. This is everything that is me.
Yeah. So again, we work through all of that kind of stuff. And what we do is, I mean, I can pretty much muscle test, any muscle that's in your body, either by using that particular muscle or by using what we call a surrogate. And if you think of surrogacy, it's a different muscle than, basically reading the energy of another muscle. And so realistically, we can go through any of each of the 14 main meridians has, a number of muscles associated with it. So we tend to test the ones that are easiest for the clients. A lot of them will be the bigger arm and leg muscles because it's more comfortable. We don't want you sitting in all sorts of contorted positions so that we can, muscle test awkward muscles. But it's almost like, and probably the easiest one that most people can do, and I don't know how easy it is for you to stand up, but if you stand up and you think of something that you love, and I'll stand side on. I know this isn't fully...
She's throwing shit around, everybody.
I just dropped my microphone. So if I turn around and I go, okay, think of something I love, my body naturally moves forward. If I think of something I dislike, I'm naturally going to move away from it.
Right.
And so that is actually a really easy, I guess, way. Oh, sorry, my microphone kept falling over then. I knocked it. Apologies, everybody.
I mean, like, so where would I apply this, right? Like, I love that one. I've never, here's a challenge too, right? We get like all of these different modalities, but we forget to use them, right? I really like that. I think one of the simplest ones is like what you just described there. Yeah. Leaning forward and leaning backwards. Where should I use this?
Do you know a really great one to do is if you're buying a present for someone that you don't know that well? I've used it before for that, and it has worked every time. Okay. You walk into a store and you go, okay, is the ideal present for that person? And you get a picture of them in your mind on the left-hand side of the store. No, it's on the right-hand side of the store. Okay. You ask simple yes, no answers.
Okay.
And it's amazing. Or if you put, say, an apple and an orange in each hand, one hand with an apple and one hand with an orange, and you feel, okay, which one would my body benefit most from right now? Your body will lean towards which one feels more right for you.
I think that would be super fun to do with like an organic apple and like a non-organic apple.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that would be great.
Yeah.
Right.
I have done it with a glass of wine in my hand, and I can tell you it never moves forward.
You're like, this glass.
Yeah, it always goes, no, you do not want that. And I'm like, yes, I really do.
You're so wrong, subconscious in every cell of my body. I'll tell you what. I get it. So, okay. So, we do this, we connect, we go through some kinesiology. I think one of the other things you talk about a lot too was your own experience. Why don't you share that with how did you get here, right? Like, okay, great, you're here, but like, I don't know, is it just like, hey, I decided one day I saw an ad for Udemy and I'm like, kinesiology is for me, or did something else happen?
Well, I'd had some pretty rough times in my marriage. I had a life on paper that most people would absolutely kill for. I had a rich, successful husband. I had 2 beautiful children. We'd traveled around the world. I'd lived in the UK 11 years. We then moved back to Melbourne, and I started getting really sick. So I ended up having chronic fatigue. I was needing 3-hour naps in the afternoon, and I was usually pretty self-motivated. Pretty focused on what I wanted. And so I started sort of seeing a naturopath and started getting an idea outside of, I guess, traditional medicine, because traditional medicine, my GP kept saying, you're the healthiest sick person I've seen. Like, all your blood tests are fine. You'll be all right. They tried to put me on antidepressants, and just in my heart and soul, I went, it's not depression. Like, it's bigger than that. And I'm not saying that, like, for me, it wasn't able to be contained within that. Yes, there were probably elements of depression there, but that wasn't the problem. And I guess I knew that at a deep level. And so I kept sort of trying different things, and getting rid of gluten, getting rid of dairy sort of helped a bit, but there still was so much else going on. Anyway, had a family holiday, which ended up being quite traumatic. And so when I got back, saw my GP and got a mental health care plan so that I could go and see a psychologist. And I rang this particular psychologist because I knew that she did mindfulness courses. I knew she did assertiveness courses. And so I signed up for her next mindfulness course. I signed in for a session with her. And the receptionist said, it's another 6 weeks away. You sound pretty stressed. She said, what's going on for you? And I said, we've just emigrated to Australia, and my husband's working in a job he doesn't like. He's, stressed. He's moved away from his family because his family were in the UK. My son's being bullied at school. My daughter is, an absolute handful. And, I'm holding it all together. And she said, and who's got your back? And that was it. I just broke into pieces. I was sobbing. I couldn't even answer her because I'm like, nobody.
Right.
I have nobody to lean on. And I didn't, hadn't really made too many good close friends by that point. I hadn't, I was on my own. Mm-hmm. And I had been for a very long time, having lived in the UK, had children over there, was not supported within my marriage, was not supported, terribly well. I did have some incredible friends over there. But I still just didn't have that support that I needed. And anyway, so she said, well, we've got a kinesiologist here. Would you be willing to try it? And I'm like, never heard of that. But you know what? I'm desperate. I need to fix myself. And I remember my first session with my kinesiologist, I swear she saw dollar signs and went, cha-ching, I'm like the perfect client, because I need to fix myself enough to fix my marriage because I'm broken. And she still laughs at me about it because she ended up being one of my teachers when I was studying. And towards the end of my degree, she's like, oh my God, I don't even recognize you as that woman who walked into my clinic. Like, it was crazy. And she did. She said to me in that first session, you don't realize how emotionally abused you are, do you? And I saw it in a lot of relationships in my life, but it took a long time to find that biggest abuser. And it was just the changing of everything for me. Within those first couple of months, I started getting a sense of me again. Some of the chronic fatigue symptoms started to dissipate. I just started to feel more whole. And I was finding bits of me that I had completely suppressed, ignored, repressed, cut off through, shame or humiliation or whatever. And I was finding all these aspects to myself that were it was like coming home. And so within 6 months of that first session, I was studying kinesiology because I thought, if I can just help one person the way this has helped me, I'll have made a difference in the world, and it'll be a life worth living. And I did. I just loved it. Every time I went into class, it was like I was remembering stuff that I knew from, whether it be past lives or whatever. It felt like this really soul deep remembering. And it was amazing. I ended up starting my advanced diploma before I'd even finished my diploma. I overlapped them by about 6 months. I did all of the extras the college offered. So I did quantum neurology, which is like anxiety and depression on that quantum level, looking at advanced hormones and glands balances, looking at all of these different advanced techniques, as well as doing total body modification, which is like a more looking at all the systems of the body and how they interact with different energy points and things like that. So it's been phenomenal. Like, I did about 6 years worth of study in 4 years because I just kept finding more stuff that I just wanted to know about. And the more I learned, the more I realized I didn't know. And I just wanted to know more stuff. And I think I'm still in that state. The more I know, the more I realize I don't know. So,
yeah, for sure. Right. There's a huge rabbit hole when it comes to this stuff, especially when it's had the impact that it has had on you, right? And you're like, I gotta go shout this from the mountaintops, right? Everybody, you gotta come try this out, right? And then like you're always exploring on how to improve that, how to grow in this thing, and like you said, oh, I didn't know that about that, and you know, maybe you find another person that is similar, but just a slight sliver different, and like you chase that rabbit hole, like and you're like, but it all kind of comes together, right? To the point where you are, right? It's just it's all what you need to be doing what it is that you're doing, you know. So when you went to the nature path, I guess you'd already gone through like the traditional path, right? And you'd said, all right, look, I've tried this, and this. The answers, I'm getting answers, but it doesn't feel right.
Yeah,
right?
I wasn't actually getting answers. They were just trying to chuck stuff at me. I don't know if they were hoping I'd go away or if they just didn't know what to do. You know, I was suffering for say 13 days a month with my cycle, and it was all emotional based. You know, but they didn't pick that up. They were just trying to put me on the antidepressants, and that was literally the only answer they seemed to have for me was antidepressants. And I'm going, that's not quite right. Like, that doesn't feel right for me. And so, and in the end, it was the best thing that could have ever happened, because it did lead me down this path, and it did lead me to a place whereby I found exactly where I need to be and what I needed to learn to get myself to a level of health and wellness that a few years back I would never have thought possible.
No, for sure. And you even mentioned, you know, where you started off and 6 months later, how great of a distance or just how much difference can occur within 6 months if you put in the work, right? If you, you know, kind of follow some of these other ways of being. I mean, you even mentioned that too, like your dietary changes. While it had a difference, it wasn't it, right? But it's the kind of holistic practice that brought it all together for you.
Yeah, it was really doing a lot of the deep emotional clearing and the psychological work. So basically, I never felt safe, and so I was constantly on edge. I was, you know, I was always reactive because my nervous system didn't feel safe ever. So I had long bouts of insomnia, and I still occasionally get them. That's usually when I know that my body's going out of whack again, is that the insomnia returns, and I'm like, right, I've got to go back and, you know, do some different work, because you're not supposed to sleep deeply if you've got a bear outside your cave. You know, you're just not. Idea. Yeah. And when my nervous system is primed.
Right. No, it's funny bringing that up. I was literally like kind of taking a snooze in the woods the other day, and you know, just kind of a brief one, and it's right across like a path where my son and I had like seen like what may have been bear prints. I was like, you know what? Every noise I was like herky jerky all around. So you're right. You don't sleep well when there's a bear out and about. You know, I think the other thing too is like you talk a little bit too about like the mindfulness and the assertiveness. Where did that show up for you? And kind of like I still remember taking a communication course where, you know, Western women in general, if you're being assertive, you're being perceived as like a bitch, right? Like,
hell yeah.
So I'm sure that there was a lot of that there too. It sounds like you were in a relationship that wasn't amazing, and like, you know, to assert yourself, you probably felt like you were out of line. So how, you know, talk a little bit about, you know, getting through that as well.
Yeah. Look, I think this is that spectrum that we live on. We are taught that if we do anything for ourselves, that we are harming other people, generally as women. Men don't seem to have the same messaging to the same extent. We are taught that the best thing we can be as women is selfless, and that if we are not selfless, we are being selfish. And the selfishness hurts other people. It damages them. It goes as far as damaging them, and not just damaging them, but taking away what is good in their life if we decide to take what we need for our life. That's the way, you know, those ingrained messages go. Now, It's really interesting. I've changed my idea on selfishness over the years. One, I used to think it was doing something to hurt somebody else. But when I heard Abraham Hicks talking about it, they said, if you think about who is calling you selfish, selfishness actually doesn't exist, because most of the time the person calling you selfish is wanting something from you that you're not willing to do or willing to give or can't give, but they're wanting it from you. So actually, it's the person calling you selfish that is tending to display those selfish qualities. And I'm like, oh my God, mind blown.
Right. Yeah, that's such a light bulb moment with that. I've definitely heard her, go through that as well.
Yeah, it's
definitely
phenomenal.
A light bulb. You're like, oh my, she's
penny
right.
drop. Yeah, it's huge.
Right.
Yeah.
Like mind blown, 100%. Here's what I spaced on this for a second. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, but selflessness does what it says on the tin. It makes less and less and less and less and less of ourselves, because we are giving and giving and giving and giving and giving from a resource that we don't have.
Yeah. Somebody said something to me that kind of resonated, and I'm still trying to figure it out 100%. But she's like, if you had to sacrifice something, it wasn't yours to begin with.
Yeah.
Right. Which I thought was a pretty powerful line.
Yeah.
And I think that's in line with what you're saying there, right? Like this thing that you kind of completely diminishes and eradicates all of who you are.
Yeah.
Without replenishment, right?
Yes, absolutely. But in the middle of the two is us actually being self-full and making ourselves a priority to fill ourselves up. And then we can give to other people from that overflow. And so in the middle of that selfishness or selflessness, I don't see either of those as being a place to stand. It is standing in the middle. And that is part of that assertiveness. It is part of that, no, this is the space I'm going to take up. I am going to allow myself to be in this space. I'm going to trust that I deserve to stand here. I am also going to not just give and give and give. I'm going to allow myself to receive. And then everybody else.
Too, right?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
That's a big one too, right? I had some conversations with a guy who brought that to light too. We want to give. I'm such a good giver, but are you good at receiving?
Yeah.
Right. And you kind of, if you don't receive, you don't have anything to give.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
If we think about the basics of that, we're doing one part of the equation through giving. So if when I talk about the masculine and feminine principles, it has nothing to do with gender. It has nothing to do with sexual identity. It is just purely, I guess the binary way that it is able to be described. But if you think about the male sex organs, they are out there, they're projective, they are giving, they can be easily seen. That's the masculine aspect of ourselves. So the out breath, because it is going outward, it is the masculine breath. Everything internal, the in-breath, the female sex organs, it's receptive, it's hidden, it's mysterious, it's emotive, it's all about feeling. That's that feminine aspect. So if we're just giving, all we are doing is our masculine side, and we all have this inside us. We just have it to different percentages and different, ways that we express it. But even, the most masculine of all the people who identify as highly masculine still have feminine aspects to them. And those people who, identify as very feminine also have masculine aspects to them. Because if we just had the feminine, we would never do anything. And if we just had the masculine, we'd run ourselves into the ground because we'd never actually stop and just be for a bit. And so the receptivity is actually really, really important for us to balance out that feminine aspect and to replenish ourselves so that we have enough to give. Because if I'm giving and giving, if you look at all the different hats that we wear, I'm a mother, I'm a partner, I'm a business owner, I'm a facilitator in this healing space. I've got all of these different things that I do. Now, if I am only giving, say, to my business, then I'm actually taking energy from other areas of my life to constantly be giving to that. So I need to be giving and receiving in all of these different areas of my life. But without the receptivity part, I am purely giving from a finite resource.
Right.
And that's when we end up run down.
No, 100%. Makes sense. Makes sense. You brought in, you talked kind of I'm going to go back to the bear in the woods and sleep and the insomnia and not being able to kind of release your state of what is it, the sympathetic mode, right?
Yep.
Like being kind of stuck in fight or flight.
Mm-hmm.
You shared on one of your I think YouTube's a breath work, or just kind of a type of breathing that you can do to release and reset the autonomic nervous system. I would love it if you just shared that here on this podcast. Even if I teach stuff and share stuff, nobody listens to me. So
Yes, they do.
I'm kidding. You know how it is. Like,
I do.
it's all you can share it as many times as you want, but just getting another perspective. And again, this could be, that person on the other end today that maybe they just can't hear that from me, but they can hear it from you. So
yeah, absolutely. So often when we're in anxiety, we breathe into the top part of our lungs, but our lungs actually start around the second and third rib space. So if we're only breathing in the top part, the main bit of our lung with all of the alveoli in isn't actually getting the oxygen, because that comes down into these, into the lobes at the very base of our lungs. So what we need to be doing is pushing that breath much, much deeper. And that's what people talk about in terms of belly breathing and things like that. Of course, your belly doesn't actually breathe. There are no lungs in our belly, but we want to be pushing it down. What happens when we stay in anxiety breathing is our diaphragm actually gets caught and tightened because it's not being exercised with that breath. It's not being pushed down. So we end up with quite a tight diaphragm, which is why a lot of people who are in long-term stress feel that they can't breathe fully all the time because their diaphragm's actually caught up and stuck. So what we want to do is actually deep breathe in, and it works well if you put a hand on your chest. So you can actually feel that your chest isn't moving until the very end of the breath. And you just push the air down as deep into your belly as you can and really feel that expanding without the chest moving. And the chest will move at the end, of course, because eventually that's where the air will end up, in the top part of the lungs. And then as we let it out, and we only need to do 3 or 4 of those deep, deep breaths. So I tend to sort of breathe in for 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I'll hold for 1 or 2. So I do quite slow breaths. I mean, look, you could count to 10 if you really want to, but I tend to just count less and slower. So just breathe in really deeply, hold it for a second or 2, and then let it out. And I tend to make my out breath slightly longer than my in breath. I don't know why. I just do. No right or wrong. You do what feels good for you. But breathing really deep into those lobes of the lungs, imagining that air being pushed right down into the deepest alveoli. So then your oxygen and your blood can do that transfer so much easier, because you're trying to do it where there's the bulk of that transferability. And I get people to practice it at things like when they're stuck at the traffic lights. You're going to get a minute or 2. So you know what? Every time you pull up at lights, practice 2 or 3 big deep breaths. And then, and the other thing I try and get them to do is actually notice what's going on. Whose turn is it next? Oh, look, there's a mother with a baby in a pram over there. There's a red car here. Just coming really into that present moment. So one of the things that I want to do, because I'm trying to reduce stress in people's lives, the tools that I give them are there to reduce stress in their lives. If I tell you to, you've got to deep breathe 10 times a day, oh shit, there's another thing for my to-do list, and fuck, how am I going to fit that in? I'm already busy enough. Holy crap. And now it feels like a chore. And when it feels like a chore, we're not going to do it. And that's why I try and get people to do it in those kind of situations where they're already there. Oh, look, there's a minute or 2 because I have to stop because all the traffic stopped. Okay, what can I do in this moment? Let's bring myself back. Let's become really present. Let's listen to the words in the song on the radio. Let's do some really deep breathing. Let's become really hyper-focused on this minute right now. And then off we go again. And so it's about trying to knit some of those practices in to the everyday. And that's how I found my changes happened, was because I would knit them in and then they would just become seamless. And, you know, so every morning, for example, when I have a shower, I imagine that water is just washing away anyone else's stuff that's attached to me, anything that doesn't belong to me, any, you know, hooks, cords, seeds, attachments, implant, you know, anything. That water rinses it away, sends it back to Mother Earth for her to transmute into something beautiful. And then I'm not just cleaning, you know, my body, I'm also cleaning my energy field. And so it's ways to knit those practices in, whether it be deep breathing or energy clearing or whatever it is, so that it feels seamless in your day. And you're not just doing, oh, here's another thing I've got to do, and here's another thing I've got to do, and here's, you know, we don't need more stress. We got enough of that.
Yeah, nobody needs more shit to do.
Hell
right?
no.
Which is kind of funny,
Hell
like
no.
especially when you first get started in this space. If you're not already like in personal development, or you have these spiritual practices, you're like, all right, you need to do this, and like you have this huge list of all the shit that you're supposed to do in the day.
Yeah.
Like, this is stressing me out.
Yeah.
Like, how am I supposed to like gain enlightenment? Like, and I've got this list of shit to do. I don't know if I'm gonna get to like, you know, 4 or 5 of them, and I got like 12.
Yeah.
I'm never gonna nirvana.
Hell yeah.
So I love the concept too, and the idea of like knitting it in, right? Like I just thought about like, you know, the fabric of your life, knitting it into like, you know, the fabric of your life so that it becomes seamless. It's there. It's not like, you know, a stop, and you don't have to stop your entire day. Pull out like your meditation blanket and, you know, wait for the dew and humidity to be like 67% before you can, you know, breathe easily, right?
Yeah.
There's no specific time and or space that you have to do it.
Yeah.
You make it a conscious choice to like pause, take it all in.
Yep.
And you know, self-fullness.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. And it's doing it throughout the day, because let's face it, I mean, I walk my dog for an hour and a half to 2 hours every morning. I'm then trying to fit in a workout, plus I run a business, plus I got a family to look after. You know, my time's pretty precious right now. And okay, I could walk my dog for less, but it's also my exercise. And, you know, there's a whole heap of things I guess I could sacrifice a little bit more. But, you know, my walk with the dog is, you know, I'm on the beach every morning. Rain, hail, shine, you name it, I'm there. It was 3 degrees this morning, I think, when I was out there walking. You know, I'm also doing cold water swimming now, so I go down into the bay. I think it's about 9 degrees at the moment. I do about 20 minutes in the bay.
Is that Celsius or Fahrenheit?
Celsius.
I gotta imagine it's Celsius, right?
Yeah. Not 9 Fahrenheit.
Either way,
it's still cold.
It doesn't sound like warm. It doesn't sound warm. So
yeah, it's not. But you know, I've got those little practices that I do, and they are my meditative times. Right, when I'm walking the dog at the beach, you know, it's pick up the ball, throw the ball. Pick up the ball, throw the ball, you know, and walk. I think I do about 7K or roughly, maybe a bit more. And then, you know, it's the same when I'm in the water. I have to breathe well, because in that cold water, it takes your breath away. I practice my breathing. And I get into this place where after about, it's about 6 or 7 minutes, it stops hurting. And then it gets into this really calm bit. And that's
called
beautiful.
Hypothermia.
Oh, that's why it feels like
good.
that. No, not quite. I haven't gotten there yet, thank God.
I got you. Well, Amanda, I totally appreciate you being on. I know that you've also got at least one book. And do you have more than one book? Because I didn't go that deep on it. But
I have one book, but there's also a secret book club title. So it was the same book, but I really wanted it printed under the working title as well. The actual book itself is called Divine Messy Human. And the secret book club title is called Don't Let That Cunt Steal Your Bricks.
That's great. And I think you know, at the very least, when I saw I think I might have seen that somewhere too, and just trying to follow everything.
Yeah.
But I really like the divine messy aspect, right? It's very you know, I think on this podcast and what we do here is try to be approachable in this space. There's way too many motherfuckers who are like again, who put themselves at like, you know, at a level that you're like, listen, I'm just trying to have a conversation.
Yeah.
I don't know that we need to, you know, get that deep into it all. Like sometimes surface level conversations are real cool.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
And I think the other thing is it's about being relatable, and it's about doing stuff that's actually going to work. Like as you said, if we did all the spiritual practices that we got taught, we'd be spending 24 hours a day in our spiritual practices.
You wouldn't have time for anything else.
No time for anything else, but we live life.
Right.
So yeah, I'm so with you.
Right. I mean, I think, and look, if we look at Hinduism, they've got a pretty. I mean, listen, I know it gets romanticized, but like there's the Grinahasta, right? Like there's a householder. There's like that's what you're doing, and that's your life. And then there's the spiritual aspirant who goes and meditates in a cave. Those are your two choices. You can either live your life with your family or go live in a cave.
Yeah.
Right. It's really hard to kind of get the in between. Anyways, try to make it approachable. And I think that what you've got here is like super approachable, and I appreciate that. So appreciate you being on. I have a couple questions for you, if you don't mind. So I really do look at this as kind of like a spiritual speed dating, right? Like, so somebody's going to come on today. They're going to be like, you know what, Brandon, this isn't working out anymore. I'm ready for my next dating partner. And Amanda Kate, that could be you. So let's see here. Spiritual Bachelorette number 1. What is the relationship between science and religion?
At the moment, I see them as a little bit one and the same. They can both be very doctrinated and dogma-filled, or they can be done with heart and soul. And I tend to resonate more with the heart and soul in both aspects.
Yeah, it seems like, and I like that, right? It seems like there are these fine lines to follow, right? I'm not sure how deep you've gotten into the breath work. Who's the Russian who oh man, his name's escaping me right now, but who came up with all this, the breath work, the guy who did the mass, he set up like the breathing oxygen ratio to go into space, right? People trashed his work because it was going to interfere with other people's like studies. That there's a fear that everything you've learned is wrong. Right. And you don't want people to find that out.
And what is true science and true religion about? For me, it's about curiosity and asking questions and knowing that there is no finite yes or no that is 100% right or 100% wrong. And so the best science for me keeps asking questions and is actually prepared to be wrong. And for me, it's the same about spirituality and religion. The number of times I have fucked up and I've been wrong, you know what? I'm getting better and better at owning it and being responsible for my own shit. And I see that within, it was like the whole thing that we've had fed into us over in Australia the last few years, trust the science. Well, the fact that you're even saying there's the science, for me, that doesn't sit right, because science is all about asking questions and being prepared for different answers that don't fit with your paradigm and your desired outcome. And that's the exciting bit for me is science and religion that go and keep asking questions and keep their curiosity alive and keep in touch with that childlike innocence.
Right. No, I love it. I love it. Let's go with what prevents people from living to their full potential.
I think it's pretty much, what I was writing about in my book. It's trusting external influences over your internal truth. And our internal truth is valid, and the way we experience the world and interact with the world is such an important thing. And so often we defer our inner knowing to other people's supposed expertise, but they don't know us. They don't know our life path. They don't know our spiritual purpose. They're coming with their own baggage and their own filters and their own ideas about life. And you know what? We need to learn to trust what's in here, our own heart and soul. Yeah. And our breath work connects us to the body. And the more connected we are to the body, the more we can actually read what the body's trying to tell us and what our soul's trying to tell us.
So let's explore that just for a second too. Like when you say connect to the body, what are you saying?
Feel into it. So, when we're buzzing up in our heads, We tend to be in, I call it either the wounded feminine or the wounded masculine. We're trying to, overgive, over control, overthink, overanalyze. And what happens is, if you imagine a cardboard cutout of yourself as your energy field, our self point moves from this place on our chest. There's like a little, the little divot here. On our sternum, it's just under the notch there. There's like a little divot. That's our self point. For a lot of clients at the moment who are in overthinking, their self point is up around here, up around the top of their forehead. That means that energetically they are literally in their head, but also their feet are not touching the ground. The more our feet touch the ground and the more grounded we are and the more in our body we are, the higher we can actually reach. People seem to think that if they want to meditate, they need to just go up and they can, go up like a helium balloon. But the more we tether ourselves to the ground, the higher we actually get in that aspect. And so that's what I mean about being in our body, is being firmly anchored into this 3D reality that we've chosen to be present in right now. And from that 3D reality, if we are anchored into it, we can then lift higher and we can go into a more divine aspect of thinking where we acknowledge our emotional self, we acknowledge our logical self, and we are able to go then above that and get our out of the box thinking happening, our intuition.
So I need to use my body to get to my brain? And connected to source. I mean, so the other thing I think about too, right, is like I think about the idea of lightning, right? If lightning strikes and I'm not grounded, there's nowhere for that energy to flow. So in order for energy to flow, there's got to be some type of grounding. Is that fair?
That's the way
is that in line with what you're kind of saying here?
Imagine when you're the one I use with clients is, when your batteries aren't quite in your TV remote and it does nothing. You can't power the TV. Yeah, you need both ends of your battery connected to actually do shit. Sure. And so, the way I look is one of our terminals is connected to the earth and the other terminal above our head is connected to the heavens. If we are connected in like that, we are so much more useful. And I think that's why they call it embodiment. It's about being in the body, because so many of us, if you think about the language we use, she's beside herself right now. Energetically, often I will then find the self point literally beside themselves, because energetically their energy system is not quite in their body properly. When we are fully embodied, we are feeling what we need to feel in this moment. We are getting the insights and intuition we need in this moment to make more empowered, more discerning choices that are more self-loving.
But I mean, if we think about the idea of being in alignment, right? Energetically being in alignment, then we would think about like our body, being displaced over here and be like, well, you kind of all need to be working together as kind of one, right? Okay. Awesome. Awesome. Amanda Kate, such a blast. I know we could have, taken this in so many other different ways. I appreciate you, having this conversation with me. Had a blast. Where can people go find out more about you, connect with you?
The easiest place to start is probably my website, www.amandakate.com.au. My book is on there and all sorts of things. I am on Facebook at Amanda Kate Transformation. I am on Insta at Amanda__Kate. And I've just joined TikTok and having heaps of fun on there at Divinely Messy.
Nice. Thank you so much for being on.
So thank you so much, Brandon. It's been so good, and keep bringing your work into the world because it's so needed.
Thank you.
Really hope you enjoyed this episode of the Spiritual Dope Podcast. Stay connected with us directly through spiritualdope.co. You can also join the discussion on Facebook, Spiritual Dope, and Instagram at spiritual_dope. If you would like to speak with us, send us an email through brandon@spiritualdope.co. And as always, thank you for cultivating your mindset and creating a better reality. This concludes the most thought-provoking part of your day. Don't forget to like and subscribe to stay fully up to date. Until next time, be kind to yourself and trust your intuition.